You are listening to LatinxAmerica, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade. Welcome back and thanks for listening. Today's guest is Andrés Ochoa. He is a serial entrepreneur, advisor, and public speaker with over 10 years of experience in biotechnology and bioinformatics in the public and private sectors in the U.S., Brazil, and Germany. He is also a reviewer of scientific journals and holds 10 honors and awards. Andrés develops and supports technologies and businesses that use biotechnology to create global impact. He has always been at the forefront of innovation, and in 2014, Andrés coined the following quote: "When you feel that you should have been born in the future, the only option is to build that future so you can finally get home." And he's certainly focusing on building that future. So let's listen to his story. Hi, Andrés. Thank you for being with us this morning. Can you share a little bit about your personal journey into biotech?
Sure. I was born in Colombia, in Bogota, and at that time I studied microbiology. There were no specific classes for biotechnology, which was not only understand the microbes and the environment, but also try to use microbial compounds and technology. So because of that, I was looking how to learn biotechnology, and I ended going to live in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, where I did part of my PhD in genomics in Sao Paulo University, and I did part of it also in the Freie Universität in Berlin, Germany. So I was moving from microbial to genomics and to data. And that's basically how we see right now biotechnology, like an information technology in which we can use DNA to reprogram microorganisms, to reprogram plants, and try to come out with new materials that we can use.
Great. So you went from Colombia to Brazil, and for some people, biohacking, biohacker, it's something new in terms of the awareness level that people have about this field. Can you define what biohacker is and how someone can become one?
Sure. I like to give an example about technology in computers, IT. Let's say in the 70s, you have these huge computers in universities. Not much people have access to them. Not much people have the tools or the knowledge to use them. And then with the years coming, we have finally at some point something that was a personal computer. And this personal computer give access to this technology to everybody outside the universities. So once the people had access, they began to first make it better, enhance the technology, but at the same time find uses that nobody knew what to do initially with a computer. Actually, the first things that people figure out how to use in a computer was the spreadsheets, like Excel was the first thing. Say, okay, I need a computer because I want to use that. Before that, a lot of people was playing with computers, but nobody had much idea how they would use them, besides maybe some calculations. So biology is going in the same path. Initially, biotechnology, which was my area of study for more than 10 years now already, is a really hard technology in a way that is all jail in universities, only people with PhDs or a lot of knowledge can use them. And the biohacking movement is exactly how we can democratize the access to this technology, how we can make people able to understand it better without having a PhD, how we can make people to begin to use it, because in reality, we need a lot of people working on this technology to make it more usable and to go forward, because there's a lot of expectations and things that we know this technology can help us to do in terms of health and materials, food, but there's still a lot to understand. So this is a really young community, and the idea is exactly that, how we take this technology outside the universities and how I can have access without having all these barriers, and how I can bring people from different areas to work on this. Like, for example, in computers, you have designers helping you to do the interface, the graphic interface, to be usable for people. So it's not only computer scientists that actually work on computers. Yeah. And now these days, like everybody does it. Biology is the same. We need people from different areas to approach biology, mathematicians, physicists, artists, designers, to help us to actually make this technology to be mainstream. And biohacking is about that, how we democratize the technology and make it usable for everybody.
So you wouldn't necessarily have to have a PhD and be so focused in that specific area, like you said, biology, but it's a way that someone that is out there, maybe currently working in tech as a designer, that has an interest in science, could jump into this type of field. So democratizing and making it available to everyone. What led you to combine your love of science with entrepreneurship? Because you're an academic. I mean, you have advanced degrees and you've done a lot in the field. And are you seeing more people in science kind of moving in this direction as well?
Sure. So the first point was I live in Colombia, in Brazil, in Mexico. I have gone a couple of times, in Argentina. And then you begin to understand kind of the ecosystem of science and technology in Latin America. Yeah. And one of the things we have is we don't have money. That's kind of the problem. Yeah. So a lot of research in Mexico, Brazil relies in government money. Here in the United States also. But sometimes you don't see so much merging between the private and the private sector and the universities. And that led us a big gap of how we can bring money to actually do the science we want to do. So from the beginning, like personally, my dad and my mom, they're economists. So I always had been kind of aware where the money comes. And it was okay, if I want to do science, if I want to build things to help people, there's a part of it which is I need to raise money to do this. I can't rely only on the government. In places like United States, we have a little more balance. Still, the science here also depends a lot. I live in San Francisco, that's why I say here. It still depends a lot on the government. But at the same time, there's a lot of communication between the private industry and the academics to try to make things happen. So being in Latin America, that was like a necessity. I had to do it in terms of do a couple of projects I wanted in university when I was a PhD and I have students. I had to raise money, talk to companies, made them to understand what was the importance of what I was developing. And that was like my first step, I think, into entrepreneurship, how to figure out how to find money for actually do the science and can build the things that I believe gonna help people.
So having your parents and the in economics helped you see that there had to be a pragmatic way to approach launching your venture or focusing in science, which is what your passion was as you were growing up.
Yeah, the thing is, like in science sometimes, and I give talks around Latin America to scientists to become business people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that hard. Like, my business is a very interesting field, but all the hard science the scientists have to learn for 5-10 years, it's harder to understand sometimes how to do business. Business is you need different skills,
Mm-hmm.
but there are skills that you can try to learn faster. And you need more soft skills. You need to learn how to talk to people. You need to learn how to express science to people who has nothing to do with science, because otherwise they just get lost and there's no way for them to understand the message. So all these kind of communication skills, I think they're really important. As a scientist, we sometimes just want to look like really into our small point of view on life and science, and I just want to do science. And at that point, we miss the opportunity to show the value of the science and biotechnology to the common public. And at the end of the day, this is a technology that it's even we see the impact that the IT technology has had in our lives. We're talking about DNA. We're talking about the thing that you are built from, the data that makes you kind of a life organism. So it's even more important for us to have a horizontal conversation with the public in which they want to understand what we do and they can participate and give their ideas. And the only way to do that is to be able to communicate what we do in a more simple way so everybody can understand it. So I believe like one of the huge points was like I was at home and my friends that are from different fields normally. So it gives me like a more overview about the whole spectrum of things going on in the world. I follow economic. I did my minor in anthropology. So it's kind of try to understand the other side of the technology. It's not only tech. Tech is a tool. People is what we're trying to help. Yeah, we're trying to build for people. So I think that's the big impact of my on my racing, was try to see different points of view on how to connect that with science, not only science for the sake of science.
So it's bridging different worlds and different areas of interest in a way that's consumable to someone like me. I'm fairly new to
Sure.
to biohacking, you know. So you were also part of an accelerator. How did that experience shape your career trajectory as well?
Okay, that was really interesting. So I was working in Sao Paulo University for 2 years, and I kind of figured out that I was not made for academics. I think it's amazing work. There's people that is really doing amazing science, but from my point of view, one of the things that I didn't like is things move really slow, and I don't have. I like to see things coming. So sometimes in universities, you rely in a lot of bureaucracy and rules that takes a long time to actually do something. And I figure out that maybe in the private sector, if you are able to understand how this can be help people, but at the same time being a good business, because obviously the investors need to also have a return for their investment, things move really faster. So after working 2 years in Sao Paulo University, I had some friends that they were here at United States at Singularity University. And Singularity is a really interesting place in the kind of mindset they have about how to tackle big problems in humanity. But sometimes they need more technical people to make this actually to happen. So I was pretty lucky. I met these guys. They invited me initially as an advisor in 2015, I think so. Yeah, 15. And at that point, they invited me as advisor of the company they were trying to create inside Singularity in the program. And at the end, they were more with a background of business and software and hardware, not biotech business. So they say the background. So they told me to jump into this new company, and we were together. And that company got later investment accelerated by accelerator that is called IndieBio. So at that point, IndieBio was the first accelerator in the world focusing in biotechnology. And that was the first time they opened the doors. So I was part of the first batch of 12 companies. At that time, I had a different company for the one that I have now. I had a company that used to be robots for automation, for making easier to do this molecular biology. And it was really aligned with my interest in biohacking and democratization of technology, because it was a way for us to build machines to help people to access this technology using the cloud. They could connect to the machines and do experiments. So we got investment initially from IndieBio, and then for another accelerator that is called 500 Startups. And in IndieBio, we didn't get only the money, but we also got a lot of mentorship. And that was my first jump into entrepreneurship. I didn't know what was a convertible note, what was a cap when I got here. So it was really valuable to listen from these guys, these kind of things. But at the same time, I think it's not only accelerator as an institution, but at the same time, I was with 12 groups, 12 companies that they were struggling to do the same that I was trying to do. So it was a lot of communication between the different founders to try to figure out, okay, you understand this, explain me, I understand this, try to how to jump into business. And I was also pretty lucky because I was the only hard scientist in my company. The other ones were more business-oriented people. So I learned a lot of business from my co-founders in the first company, and that was really made me to jump really fast from being a scientist to entrepreneur. And that for me is one of the first keys in life. Like, you have a lot to learn from people that is around to you. It's just a matter to sit down and listen and figure out what they do right and wrong. So for me, my first source of learning is always people.
So you went from academia, which is slow moving, to literally an accelerator. So you were working with people that were moving super fast. So that must have been a good transition. And as you mentioned, this was a good experience for you in terms of a learning experience, but also it helped you move on to your latest venture, which is OneSkin. Can we talk about a little bit about OneSkin and what prompted you to launch it?
Sure. So after my first company, we tried different businesses, and it was not a good. It was a great, interesting technology, but it was not an amazing business. And the investor knew it, and it was really interesting because we were really ahead of our time. Like it's something that is going to be huge. This field of automation in biotechnology, but still there's few people to understand what to do with that automation. And in that regard, we, after 1 year running the company, we tried different business models, and we figured out that was not the best company to have. So we closed it. And the investors in the bio that I have invested in my initial company, they were investing in a second company, which is One Skin. So it was really interesting because here in Silicon Valley, also the people understand that sometimes you need to failure. Actually, most of the time you failure before you actually succeed. So it was really a lot of things that I learned in the first company, and they had a faith in the people, but they knew it was not a good business. So they told me, okay, we have another investment in which is more interested into anti-aging, and they need somebody with more experience into raising money. At that point, I was already understanding how to do business in the United States, and somebody that at the same time also knows how to deal with data in genomics, which was my PhD. So I had like two parts of it. So I met my co-founder, which is Carolina. She's Brazilian, and it was really interesting because the company was already started. They were struggling in raising the money, but the science was really interesting, and the group that was trying to like make this happen was really good people. So I joined them. I joined them as an advisor initially also, and after 1 month they told me, no, come and jump as a co-founder, give you a part of the company. And we were really successful in figuring out how to leverage the good science. These people, all of them were more focused on the tissue engineering field, and how to leverage that knowledge with a necessity, which is anti-aging, is how to prevent your body to fail with the years. Because the older you get, the more there are certain diseases that are related to the aging process,
Mm-hmm.
like Alzheimer, cancer. That's things that normally don't happen when you're young. So there's things in your system that are changing, that your system is not able to keep on doing what he did when he was young, that making you get older and get more prone to get diseases. So I really think that's a really interesting field, because it's not only about lifespan. We don't want to make people 200 years. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, but what we want is if you get to your 50s, your 80s, with the health you have in your 30s or 40s, how we can make the body to keep itself on check. So when I listened about the idea, I think, okay, this is super cool. This is super interesting. If I learned a lot in my first company, but if I don't try it again, basically I will lose all the knowledge I got, because what's the point? So I was really happy to jump into this new company, and we were really lucky to find good investor. We raised the money initially, a seed investment of more than $2 million for building the company and the technology that we are building. So it was really interesting because it's like keep trying. Yeah, the first company failed, but I have so much things that I learned that I said I had to try it again. And this was another company which the market is more feasible, is more interest of investors, is something more applicable that everybody can see the value. And it was really hardcore science. That's what I like it. I didn't want to be part of a company that might be successful, but the science was not that hard, that strong. And this
Mm-hmm.
company is really a big problem. Nobody knows how to cure, if we can call aging a disease. Nobody knows how to cure it, but we know it affects everybody. So it's a lot of science that we need to figure it out. And that's one really nice challenge to have as a scientist who goes to business.
So it's about quality of life too as you age, and preventable diseases. And
Mm-hmm.
in our community, in the Latino community, you do have you have a higher incidence of some diseases. So
True.
thinking about quality of life, and maybe at some point preventing some of those diseases too. Um, but it sounded really interesting when I saw your website, and the platform that you're building. It is you're building this platform, and you're combining it with hardcore science, which I think I'm hoping that it will make a difference for for future generations.
Yeah, the idea is like we want to tackle the aging problem, but you need to begin somewhere. So we decide to begin by skin. The skin tissue is one of your biggest organs, and also at the same time is one of the more homogeneous organs. So it's really good for studying. And we have the knowledge. We produce human skin in the laboratory, so we're able to have like a lot of samples for testing. And what we do is we take that skin and we read the DNA of the skin when it's young and when it's older. So we can build models of skin that are from young people, from old people. We build also models from different ethnicities. So we have Caucasian, Afro-American, more Latin American, let's say more mixed. And the idea is the age process on the skin. You see how people age, and also people age differently. So you see maybe, for example, Caucasian, they are more prone to have more wrinkles, and maybe the Asians or Americans have different kind of aging process. So we want to understand also what is going on there. So we build all these models and we read the DNA before and after it gets old. And that allows us to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to begin to understand, because this is, I'm talking about like each reading of DNA, we're talking about thousands of data points of information, thousands of genes that are changing. And it's really hard for us as humans to figure out, okay, this is the important gene, this is the other one. Maybe there are 10, maybe there are 100, maybe there are 200 in a million of genes that we're reading. So we use machine learning to help us to build models that allow us to figure out what are the most important genes that are changing in order to try to understand what is going on in the cells when they're getting older. And we use that as a screening platform. So we have a high throughput screening platform, which means per month we're trying to do around 1,000 compounds, in which we look at the genes and see if any of those compounds is able to revert the genes patterns to the initial patterns, which means making it younger. And that's really interesting because through the genes, we can quantify the age of your tissue. What happened, let's say you're in your 30s, but you live all your life in the beach. So maybe your skin is a skin that is older because of the UV exposure. So maybe it's a skin of a person of 40. So all our organs, actually, they get older in a different rates. Depends also in our environment. So the idea is through those genes, we're able to quantify the real age of the tissue. And once we have the real age of the tissue, we use that as a ruler. So we can develop products that actually revert that age. So this is dramatically different from any other cosmetic company because they rely in qualitative data. They look at photos and see and say, okay, after 3 months, maybe it looks like you have less wrinkles. But we actually quantify the age of the tissue from the genes. And then after we have that, we take the tissue and we do photographies of the tissue to see if the characteristics of the tissue are getting better when the genes are getting better. Yeah, because you don't want also the genes to get better, which is interesting because it's a long-term reversion of the age. But also you want to be reflected in the skin because that's our main product right now. We're focusing in the skin. And we're able to see correlation between what is happening in the genes and how the skin is behaving.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And as someone who's also aging, I think it will be helpful. And that's a big market too, in terms of reversing age. You mentioned machine learning. And so how do you think AI will continue to influence biotech advances?
Well, the first point is exactly what we were discussing about the amount of data. Biology is getting really interesting because like 50 years ago, we didn't even know what was the structure of the DNA. And then in the 2000s, we figured out how to sequence the first human genome complete. And now at this moment, we're producing petabases of DNA data. Everybody's doing a lot of sequencing, a lot of, you have companies like 23andMe when you can go and read your DNA. There's a lot of things going on, information that is being generated. So the problem before was that we weren't able to generate information. Now we're able. And the problem that we have now is how to understand this information, how we actually make some sense of it. And there's when machine learning and artificial intelligence are becoming really good tools, because they help us to see patterns that as a humans we are not able to see on the nude eye. But once you use a machine a mathematical tool like this, you are able to say, okay, from these 1,000 data points, maybe these 10, 20, these 100 genes are the ones that I need to actually go inside and research more and try to understand better. So that's why it's so powerful right now, the merging between biotechnology, which is becoming information technology, and tools like artificial intelligence and machine learning, in which you can actually use that data and make sense with the models you built.
So you're able to compress and make sense of things as opposed to studying individually, which I think is exciting, because if someone is studying in school right now thinking, well, what am I going to do with my degree, or how can I make a difference in the world? Because I'm just, looking at, I'm looking at computers, I'm looking at code or whatever it is. When you talk about the innovation that could happen through AI and combining it with this hard science and seeing the patterns, I think it could really have a very bright future, and not just in terms of, the job market, but also in terms of the impact that you can have in the world.
Exactly. Yeah, you couldn't be more right. That's exactly what everybody's seeing. Like, biology used to be something in which you used to be more, okay, I stay in the laboratory and do experiments, and more we need more people with data knowledge to actually manage all the information we're producing. So yeah, that's the future, and that will have a lot of impact in health and the humans, and also in understanding how to produce new materials, because the DNA has endless opportunities to understand and build stuff around the technology. So basically, this is one of the biggest fields that is coming.
And that's exciting. That was going to be my next question, in terms of what you saw in the near future as the impact of biotech or biohacking. And it seems like it's a growing field, and what you're doing is innovating. How diverse is your field? Because we know that the tech industry is not very diverse, but how diverse is your field? And are there any major barriers to entry into your field?
Well, I think like biological science, bioengineering, it's a little more even field. You see more even in terms of gender. You see a little more balance. That, for example, tech is not 100% balanced for sure, but you see more balance in my experience, at least from one I saw in Brazil, in Latin America, I have seen here in the United States. I feel a bigger balance in anything related to biotech, that other engineerings. That's interesting. And the biggest impact right now, it depends on where you're located. That, for example, in Colombia, it's super expensive to have a PhD and to have the kind of education you need. And sometimes the quality is not that good, actually, because unfortunately, for this kind of area, you need a lot of really expensive machines, chemistry, and sometimes in countries in Latin America, you don't have that kind of access or money. In Brazil, the access was really good before. Is right now going through a economical crisis. But when I arrived to Brazil 10 years ago, was really good, actually. The quality of the education and the people were studying, and the access to the tech was really good. There was a lot of money at that point in the country. And so for me, the biggest barrier is about that. It's about like have access to study this. In Brazil, I was really lucky, because I was studying at Sao Paulo University, which is a public university. The Freie Universität in Berlin is also public. So you have access to study. If you want to study, you just can't just go and study. It's hard to go into universities. It's a lot of selection, because a lot of people wanted to do it, but still you can do it, which is amazing. So the main thing in Latin America, I think, is the lack of access to education. It's really expensive in countries as Colombia. That was my initial experience. And after that, it comes related to what you're saying about biohacking. So we want this to be useful not only for people in universities and PhDs, as I was really lucky to. So that's why I also created, like 5 years ago, a nonprofit that is called Synthetic Bio. And what we're trying to do is help people to open spaces of open science, and we call them biohacker spaces around Latin America, in which you can have access to the machines, to the infrastructure, and to the knowledge without needing to be related to a university. And in that way, we have been supporting and helping people in Brazil, in Peru, in Argentina is really new, but also people is trying. In Mexico is also really new, but people is trying to open these spaces. And the idea is help them to connect, to give them support in terms of try to connect them with people that can help them. Each space is totally independent, because I think also that's important about technology. Sometimes we try to export technology. So we say, okay, this works in Silicon Valley, this works in the United States, it should work in Latin America, and that's never the case. So it's really important for me that all these spaces are independent and they actually pursue things that they're interested in, that are important for their communities. And we are also beginning to expand to Africa, because the ecosystem in Africa is similar in terms of the lack of access to technology, and also they have a lot of problems. And it has been really interesting journey trying to talk with all these people, connect. And there are like two main things they are trying to do. One is open source technologies, which is what we were saying, try to build these machines and infrastructure in a low cost, with allow people to actually use them easily. But at the same time, they also have been another group in another part of the community who is really interested also into entrepreneurship. And that really comes connected with the necessity in Latin America of having more industry in biotechnology. We have some industry. Most of our industry, actually, the science is done outside Latin America and then is sold in Latin America. So we need actually to have research and development in Latin America. And that's pretty interesting, because this community more entrepreneurship, they are trying also to focus on that. How we build products, how we build industry in Latin America in terms of make more industry in the biotechnology for all Latin America.
Andres, it's interesting that you raised what you're doing with your nonprofit, because the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned one of the barriers is education, is the fact that you have more democratization in education through online learning. You have a lot of different, platforms out there, School of AI, Coursera, you have Udacity, you have a lot of content knowledge out there now through online platforms, which is great. But in terms of hands-on experience working with the machines that you're talking about, having those spaces is a critical component to someone actually fully developing in this field. So I think what you're doing is wonderful for the communities that are being impacted, because that's the only way probably for some of them to have access to these machines that will help them get to the next level.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because like the network by itself is more like a connecting hub. I think the people who is doing really the heavy weight of this is the local communities. So we have, for example, Pierre Padilla in Peru. He's having a space that is called Biomakers, and they are being really able to work with the universities, but at the same time have the open space for people that does not belongs to universities, and allow them to test more ideas. Because university sometimes is like, okay, this is my research as a professor and this is what you're going to do. And we need more open spaces in order to people just come and test ideas, and some of these ideas will go to market. It might be as a more, in a way, more like a technology that is open for everybody, but at the same time also as a business model that can be profitable. So I think this is really interesting to see the work of the people locally. Our role in the network is more about connecting them and trying to leverage the connections we have in the United States, the people we know around Latin America. They try to do projects together. So we built a book, was really interesting, which is exactly what you were saying. We kind of put together all the online content that you need for building a laboratory from scratch. And we published that book in Spanish, Portuguese. I speak both, and I was living in both kind of sides of Latin America. So I wanted to make it accessible for Brazil also, because sometimes Brazil kind of gets unplugged from Latin America because of language. And so we wrote it in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And then the people in Africa got really interested. So they translated to French. There's a lot of countries there. French is one of the main languages. So it's kind of the idea, exactly what you're saying, how you can build a space where you can do this. And we talk about the building, but we also talk about the biosecurity, biosafety, what is the right way to do things, because the same thing that these are really interesting technologies, are really powerful technology, and have to be used in an ethical and secure way. So we show them like the main guidelines and what is the regulation that you need to follow if you are, for example, in Brazil, or if you are in Argentina. We kind of focus in some country that we could find information, and we have people that was also co-authors that knew how that worked in their countries. And at the end, also how to raise money, how to figure out, because one of the problems in these spaces is to keep them alive, how to keep them open. So we also have a chapter about talking about how they can raise money and make this something sustainable.
So you're really talking about global effort in different, touching different parts of what needs to get done in order for those spaces or those entities to succeed. Let's go back to your team. You have a very diverse team. I saw the pictures. How do you think their perspective influences the direction and innovation of your company?
Well, it's what you're saying, like diversity are different ways of thinking. Perspective, so that help. But also, sometimes I don't think it's as diverse as maybe you might think, because my company is 80% women, for example. We only have 2 people. We're a team, around 10 people team. We only have 2 guys. So actually it's more women. And also we have a lot of scientists background. So I'm the one that probably has more knowledge in terms of business. And at the same time, we also have like this more academic background. So I hope actually with the next interaction of our company, we're going to do the next round of investment. I want to expand it and make it a little more diverse. Actually, I would like to bring more people from business. I would like to bring more people for more design and different thinking ways, because we built initially the technology and the products. We're building the products now, and we're gonna become a cosmetic brand. That's kind of the idea. So in that regard, we need also how to communicate better with people, branding, designers. So I actually want to make it more diverse. I don't think it's too diverse right now.
Okay. What's diverse when you compare it to other companies in the tech space in terms of, the number of women? But you do have, like you said, you bring different perspectives from sciences, and you do need different points of view and different skill sets to build a company. Are there resources for people that want to learn about your field, or maybe get some training or get started in biohacking, that you would recommend?
Sure. So one of the things we have is the website of the nonprofit, which is synthecbio.com. And in there we have some documents as the book that I commend to you. We also have online communities in Facebook mainly. And still not super fan of Facebook and everything that is going on, but it's a place where people just meet and talk. So I think one of the best resources is a lot of biohacking communities on Facebook of different countries and people. And then you can go and connect with other people and say, okay, I'm trying to do this. And then people say, okay, maybe try this place, look this paper, look this author, look this research. And so I think the best resource always is people. And then you have to go to the places where people meet. So like this, at this point, is more the social media, yeah. And then through there, like Wikipedia is also pretty interesting, because I remember like 15 years ago, something like that, when I was in high school, they would tell you, don't use Wikipedia. I don't want you to look there. And right now, as a scientist, when I go to a new topic that I understand, the first thing that I go is look is Wikipedia, because actually this is like a commune effort in which all the community is making this better. And right now, you actually find a really good information. Unfortunately, most of that, the best information is just written in English. So if you see the versions in maybe Spanish or Portuguese, they are good, but they are not as good as English. So I think that that's another barrier in science, actually, now that we're talking. It can also get complicated if you're not able to speak or read English, because it's where a lot of the literature and the videos and people talking is happening. So that would be a downside for the Latin American community that does not speak English or is not so related to that.
It's not as fluent, and especially when you're talking about textbook or hard science English. So are there influencers that you follow? I know you mentioned Wikipedia in terms of content and other resources, like your nonprofit, but are there influencers, people that you follow that you suggest we might want to follow if we want to stay on top of this industry news?
Yeah, but there are a couple of news feeds that I like. In terms of economics, for example, I talk to a lot of people and I like to check LinkedIn in the mornings. It has like a really short version on what is going on in macroeconomics around the world in terms of big businesses, governments, or sometimes it's interesting. For example, one of the big markers in cosmetics is Asia, Japan, Korea. So I can always paying attention to what is going on in Asia, in the United States, which is where my company is based and where I live. At the same time, in biotechnology, I like groups like Symbioveta, which also publish a lot of news about the field, more like entrepreneurship point of it. And my normal like kind of advice is people, like you have to talk to people. That's the best way to learn everything. So I don't follow like a famous guy who say things because maybe some of the things that he says is not even applicable for my reality. But I like to follow and connect with people that has been in kind of the same path or similar, that maybe a little more in my front. So I can talk to them and try to figure out how they have to move forward.
So they force the path, and they're within the topic that you're interested in. Who has influenced you the most, both personally and professionally? Let's go back to, who has helped you become who you are today?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think like there's a big component for most people, which is family. Yeah, I was from a really middle class family in Colombia. I think that traveling more than people, that I was really lucky through science. I was able to travel different countries and experience different cultures and talk and live in different places in Latin America, which have given me a really good perspective of how science and tech is been built in this region, and now in the United States and a little in Europe. So I think it's more than people. I would think it's experiences like traveling, family, and also I'm really grateful with the teachers that I have. Like I worked for 10 years in Brazil, 7 years in Brazil with a professor that she's a really hardcore science. She's called Mariana Ibanez Luis, and she's basically one of the people in charge of the biofuels project, which is huge in Brazil, about sugarcane biofuels. And I think that she was a really good influence in terms of science. Like she teach me how to be critical, how to think about science in a way. And once you have critical thinking on science, that's what I don't think is so hard for scientists to go to business. Because while you have critical thinking from science, you can also have critical thinking for business and try to make experiments and try to understand the market in a way that allow you to build a business.
Great. Do you have any advice for people considering joining your field, either those that are interested in joining or maybe investing in it? I mean, you've talked about so many of the ideas and work that you've done and things that you're considering and what you're doing through your company right now. Do you have any additional advice that you'd like to share?
Sure. Like I think the first point is trying to approach technology in a more open-minded way. Sometimes we hear a lot of taboo still in technology. People get a little afraid about things without understanding. So I think it's really good to be open-minded, to try to talk to people, to friends that you think they might understand a little better of the field. If you don't, that's really really good when you talk to people that are your friends, but they are scientists, and you say, okay, explain me a little better this. Also, it's really good for investors because this is a complete different game in terms of investment when you compare to IT or other businesses. So the cycles are really different. The kind of investment that is needed, the trying to understanding of the science, the trying to impact you can do is also pretty different. So it's a different kind of investment field. So I think it's really interesting to talk as much people as you can. If you're trying to begin a business, for me, it was really good to go through accelerator program. First, because they give you like initial money but second, because they also give you a lot of mentorship. So right now in the United States, there's a lot of interested investors. Like Y Combinator is moving to bio to invest in bio. You have in the bio, you have other players that are coming and want to give people money to start a company. So I think accelerator is a good kick to start, and that's pretty much what I think.
Thank you. And just from our conversation today and what I've been reading about you in terms of doing research to get ready for this interview, I'm just learning a lot, and I'm very excited and thankful for the time that you've taken to share your expertise. What's your next play? What's in the horizon for you? What do you see as, whether it's with your company or like a personal goal that you want to accomplish?
Well, at the company, we are going to our next investment round. So we want to grow. We want to be able to deliver the products and deliver the value we want to the people, trying to begin to understand better the aging process and try to make an impact on that. So that will be my goal, my personal goal with my company. My personal goal right now is I've been working a couple of years also recently, trying to bring companies to the United States. So I'm trying to advise a couple of companies in Latin America, try to understand if they have an interesting impact that could be global and help them to raise money here. So I'm working as advisor of a couple of groups. In Peru, for example, I work with a university that they have a local accelerator, and they're doing an amazing job looking at the companies that they can put in Peru and how they can develop there. And then I take that portfolio and try to see which ones can also make it here. So one of my personal goals is basically I consider myself very, very lucky in terms that I have a really good education and things that in Latin America are really hard to get. So my goal is try to begin to help people to do the same, to build that industry and to get that access here in Silicon Valley where I'm focused right now. Try to help them to leverage the money, and we have really good people in Latin America. Interesting infrastructure is being built. We just need to connect these two things so we can actually begin to increase the impact of Latin America in the biotech space. So that's the other thing that I'm really focused on right now.
Great. Well, Andres, thank you again for your time and for sharing your expertise. And I wish you the best of luck. Everything that you talked about is exciting, and most importantly, is very meaningful in terms of the future. So I thank you, and I look forward to following your next steps.
Thank you so much, Adriana, for the invitation. And I really think what you're doing is really interesting, because sometimes we look at things and say, oh, that's impossible, I can't do it. And when you meet the people who's doing it, it's not that different from you. So it's not rocket science. Everybody can kind of do these kind of things. It's just figure out what are the steps. So I think it's really meaningful what you're doing, trying to deliver this kind of knowledge to people online. Is really cool.
Mil gracias, Andrés, y hasta pronto.
Dale, gracias, chao.
I am excited to share with you a change in our format for this and future episodes. I usually recap some key takeaways from the interview. However, something that kept coming up during the interviews was the fact that all of our guests are lifelong learners, and not only did they have to learn about their industry or the new industry that they were joining, many times they were hearing some terms or vocabulary for the first time during conversations with potential funders or established industry leaders. So we will take an approach similar to the SAT question of the day, and from now on, we will highlight a keyword and define it. Today, we will define biohacking. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines biohacking as biological experimentation, as by gene editing or the use of drugs or implants, done to improve the qualities or capabilities of living organisms, especially by individuals and groups outside of a traditional medical or scientific research environment. And in our interview today, Andres described how his company, OneSkin Technologies, is using science and technology to help make the body age better. This is a growing field, so if you would like to learn more about this industry, you can follow Andrés Ochoa on LinkedIn, where he posts a lot of great articles related to biohacking, or as he suggests, you can find people who are leaders in this field and connect with them as well. You can also find links to suggested resources in the show notes of this podcast. Finally, let us know if you like this change in the format, and as always, I encourage you to leave a review for LatinxAmerica on iTunes, Google Podcasts, CastBox, or your favorite listening platform. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at LatinxAmerica and on Twitter at AmericaLatinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.